So Kirby at this point had 2 very successful games under his belt. And with Kirby's Adventure being a late NES game, that means he would be heading to the Super Nintendo soon, right? Yeah. The first Kirby platformer for the system wouldn't come out until 1996, the same year the N64 would come out. I don't know why, but Kirby just had this habit of coming out right as Nintendo was about to change systems. I don't know why, but that was just the thing for a while. But anyway, Nintendo would bring Kirby back to the Game Boy with Kirby's Dream Land 2, and he would be bringing a few more friends with him this time. Oh yeah, there was also one of the weirdest marketed commercials I've ever seen for a Game Boy game. I know people like to joke that in the Kirby games he's nothing more than a mass murderer, but in this commercial, that's kind of what he is. I mean, just look at him. They portray him like this and then immediately cut to the cute and innocent gameplay and then back to this. I mean, who was in charge of the marketing? Because I don't see the connection. You know what? Forget what I said about them trying to make Kirby hardcore since Nightmare in Dreamland. This is where that started. I know I'm talking a lot about the ad, but that's because there's not much to the development history of this one. Other than this was the first game in the series not to be handled by Sakurai, but instead, and I'm probably gonna butcher this, Shinji Shimura, who would direct Kirby's Dream Land 3 and Kirby 64. And these 3 games would be considered a trilogy of sorts, but I'll get into that later. And with Kirby Dream Land 2, it's worth going over something called the Super Game Boy. This was a device for the Super Nintendo that gave certain Game Boy Color games unique color palettes. But unfortunately, I don't have a Super Game Boy or a physical copy of Dream Land 2, so I can't show that off. Which is really weird because the Virtual Console and the Dream Collection can only display the game in black and white, which strikes me as odd, and Nintendo feels like they never want to acknowledge this thing for whatever reason. They acknowledged the Virtual Boy before they acknowledged the Super Game Boy. Nintendo, I love you, but I will never understand you fully. But enough of that, let's boot up the old gray brick and get things started. So Dreamland this time is separated into the Rainbow Islands, and the roads between them have been stolen by a being known as Dark Matter, who also kidnaps Deity, because he can? So it's up to Kirby and his 3 new animal friends to save the day. Just like Dreamland 1, the story is almost non-existent, nor does it really matter, so let's get a move on. So Dreamland 2 on the Game Boy doesn't go much above what the original Dreamland did. Though the game is zoomed out just a tiny bit more so you can see more of the screen, and I think it's an appropriate size to where I can see things up ahead. Most of the time, but I'll touch on that later. The animations before each world are still here and are just as adorable as ever. It's even better as we have the animal buddies to join in this time. However, the music did get a bit of a downgrade in my opinion. It's not bad per se, but I struggle to remember any tunes this time around. But something kinda cool graphically, if you do play this on the Super Game Boy, every level is in a different color, which is kind of a cool touch if you have the device. And honestly, that's all I got for the presentation, so let's move on to gameplay. So the game is kind of a weird mixture between the original Dreamland and Adventure. You still go through small levels about 3 to 7 per world and fight a boss at the end of each. Kirby himself retains his copy ability from Adventure. However, the ability pool is much smaller this time with only 7 main powers this time around. Kind of. See, Kirby himself only has 7 powers, but after fighting a mini-boss, there are 3 animal buddies that Kirby can get a ride on that will give him a new health bar and some new abilities. You have Rick the Hamster, who has a faster run speed and doesn't slip on ice for the one world that has it. Coo the Owl, who can fly, fight winds, and let Kirby suck up enemies while in the air. And then Kind the Sunfish, who can swim faster, fight currents, and can let Kirby inhale underwater. But he sucks when traveling outside the water. And with each of them, if you have an ability, you get an all-new attack. For instance, you may have a standard parasol attack with Kirby, but with Coo it becomes like Tornado. You see what I'm getting at? So if you think of it like that, in a way there's 28 powers. But besides the levels, there are bosses and minigames. Well, they're kind of minigames. It's really just survive the boss without getting hit and collect stars to get extra lives. It's not very exciting, honestly. The big thing you have to look out for Dreamland 2 are the rainbow drops. There's one in each world, and will require the right animal buddy and power in order to get it. And for the first time in the series, they are all required if you want to get to the final boss and the true ending. And honestly, that's all the new in Dreamland 2 that the other games didn't have. So what about this second adventure on the Game Boy did I like? Alright, so the good in Dreamland 2. Well, for one, I appreciate the game being longer than the original Dreamland. That one you can beat in under an hour. This one, about 2 to 4 hours, depending on how much you're collecting. Which is more meat to the adventure, which makes it easier to recommend. Next, I do like the idea of giving Kirby new moves with the animals as well. It gives you a lot of reason to experiment with each and find ones you really like. I think my favorite for each was Rick and Stone, Kind and Electric, and the best one in the game, Coo and Parasol. Gee, I wonder why that one's my favorite. In general, I would say Coo is my favorite out of the 3 animals. Mainly because you can fly faster than normal Kirby, you don't have to deal with any weird new controls, he's not too bad in the water, and I think Coo gets the best set of powers to use. And I think the bosses are pretty fun as well. Not amazing, but they are fun breaks from the game. And I'll be honest, I was kind of caught off guard by the deity boss fight. That one actually took a while to get down. But sadly, I got quite a few problems with the direction that this game went. Sadly, I do have a few issues with Dreamland 2, and they all kind of connect with one another to make the impact undoubtedly larger. For one, while I like getting new abilities using them, I'm not too keen on the idea of using animal partners in a game like Kirby. Well, except for Coo, who retains Kirby's usual flight mechanic, but I don't think Rick's speed is enough to give up the flight, as well as the way more likely chance of getting knocked into pits, and Kind, while he's great underwater, he's almost useless anywhere else. I'd honestly just skip them if I had the chance, because I don't find them to be that fun to use, and the only benefit most of the time is just the extra health. But they are required because of the rainbow drops. These make you go back into levels with a certain animal buddy and ability in order to grab it. Which, okay, maybe you'll find 1 or 2 on your own, but I'm gonna say there's a good chance you're not gonna find all of these without a guide of some kind. Why, you may ask? 1. They don't give you any clue on what level you need to go to in order to find the rainbow drop. At least Adventure would color the door differently so you could tell if you had something to still find in that level. Couldn't you have just darkened out the door you still need to look in or something like that to give the player a clue? 2. Getting to places with the right power and the right animal partner takes way too long, as you will most likely lose them from getting hit, the power falling into a pit, or being caught in a scrolling section with no chance to get it back. Which leads to 3. Scrolling levels. They suck, no questions about it. They take forever, and if you get hit, you're gonna have to spend time getting your power back, and with these stages, that often leads to death and now hunting down both the animal and power again. With no museums that have the animal buddy or powers this time around. And while we're still on the subject, screw that scrolling level in Deity's Castle. You go down a path only to find out it's the wrong one, and once you figure that out, it's too late. Not appreciated. And on a side note to the side note, the scrolling levels are the only ones that I really can remember, as the rest of them are honestly really bland, and don't have much characteristics like Adventure or even the original Dreamland had to keep them memorable. If you showed me these 2 screens back to back, I couldn't tell these were from 2 different worlds. And then number 4. The process of getting the later rainbow drops. For instance, the final world. You need to get a very specific ability route to get that one, and the game doesn't really clue you in on which one until it's too late. Or the one in World 4 where you need to get rid of your ability, take out these blocks quick, get your ability back to melt the ice in the door. Straight up, you're not doing that your first time around, and we'll have to replay the entire level again just to grab that drop. And then World 5. This one is just mean. So okay, here's the entire process on how to get this one. Get Kind from another level. Go up to the highest point of the screen. Fall down. Enter the door. Swim all the way to the left. Get the boss's ability. Enter the room again, but this time go all the way right. Get Rick, but don't get the ability, otherwise you need to start over. Take out these blocks and get Coo. Fly all the way to the right. Get the ability from the boss here. And then fly all the way left to get the rainbow shard with the ability. Because that was obvious! Seriously, I don't see anyone figuring that out without a guide or way too much trial and error. And you need to get all the rainbow drops in order to get the true ending and final boss. Which I'm cool with extending the game time, but stuff like this, no thanks. Kirby's Dream Land 2 is a bit of a weird one. I can see where the improvements are, and there really are some great ones like adding the abilities and such. But I don't know, it feels like not everything about this game was fully thought out well. It's still good, but I think a little bit of a step back. So overall, Dreamland 2 is okay. The typical Kirby stuff is fine and does what you expect, but there's not really anything here that does anything better than Dreamland 1 or Adventure. And honestly, getting the true ending is too much of a hassle without a guide of some kind, and I don't think it's worth it. I think it also has just way too many forced difficulty spikes that kind of go against Kirby's pick up and play ideals. That Deity Castle scrolling section being the biggest offender. If you do play it, I honestly just go stage to stage and don't really worry about the drops. Then it becomes a lot more fun. At least for a Kirby fan. If you're not one, I'd say pass on this one, and try Dreamland or Adventure first. I know that's maybe not the answer you guys were exactly expecting, but that's just kind of how I feel. It's honestly fine on its own, I just think it's a little lacking compared to the other two games before it. But with that out of the way, we got a big one ahead of us. Kirby Superstar, the series' main jump to 16-bit, and is regarded as one of the best games in the series. But do I think it holds up? Only one way to find out, so until then, I'll see you later.